On a spring morning in 1908, flames consumed a farmhouse in LaPorte, Indiana. When firefighters sifted through the smoldering ruins, they uncovered a horror that would shock the nation. What they found wasn't just the remains of a tragic fire, but evidence of a killing ground where dozens of men met their grisly end. The owner of this farm was Belle Gunness, and this is her villainy. Hi and welcome to Fireside Villainies, where I delve into the dark shadows of history and bring to life the chilling stories of its most infamous figures. I'm Michael, and it's great to have you here. Today we descend into the twisted tale of one of America's most prolific female serial killers, Belle Gunness, known as the Black Widow of the Midwest. This woman turned her farm into a death trap, luring countless men to their doom with promises of love and marriage, only to butcher them for their life savings. From the fjords of Norway to the fertile fields of Indiana, Belle Gunness left a trail of death that still haunts the American imagination. Follow me through the shadows as we explore the life of this calculating killer whose true body count may never be known. In the year 1859, in the small Norwegian village of Selbu, a child named Brynhild Polsdatter Storset was born into a world of hardship and poverty. The eighth of 8 children, young Brynhild grew up in a stone cottage overlooking the stark beauty of the Norwegian countryside. Her family worked as cotters, tenant farmers who paid their rent through labor, a life of endless toil with little reward. Norway in the mid-19th century was a land of limited opportunity. The harsh climate, scarce farmland, and rigid social structure offered little hope for advancement. Young Brynhild watched her parents struggle against poverty, their hands permanently gnarled from work, their backs bent before their time. It was a life she was determined to escape. Local legend in Selbu whispers of a dark moment in young Brynhild's life, a vicious kick to the head by a farmhand that some say changed her forever. While unverified, villagers claim the girl was never quite the same after, her personality shifting in ways that made even her family uneasy. Whether true or not, this rumor would follow her story like a shadow. As a young woman, Brynhild was strikingly tall, nearly 6 feet, with broad shoulders and powerful arms developed through farm labor. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about her unusual strength, how she could lift hay bales that took 2 men to move, how she could work from dawn to dusk without tiring. In an era when women were expected to be delicate, Brynhild's physical power was both impressive and unsettling. She possessed a peculiar kind of beauty, piercing blue eyes, thick blonde hair, and a smile that could charm or chill depending on her mood. But behind that smile lurked an ambition as cold as a Norwegian winter. At 22, Brynhild made a decision that would change her life and end many others. She joined the wave of Norwegian immigrants heading to America, that promised land of opportunity. In 1881, she boarded a ship bound for New York, leaving behind everything she knew. When she stepped onto American soil, Brynhild Polsdatter Storset was no more. She emerged as Belle Gunness, ready to reinvent herself in the new world. Belle first settled in Chicago, finding work as a domestic servant. The bustling city was a far cry from rural Norway. But she adapted quickly. She learned English with remarkable speed, adopted American customs, and began to understand how to navigate this new society. More importantly, she discovered something that would shape her future: insurance policies. In 1884, Belle married Mads Sorensen, a fellow Norwegian immigrant. They opened a confectionery store in Chicago, but the business struggled. Then, in 1896, their store mysteriously burned down. Even then, whispers of arson circulated through the community, though nothing could be proven. The insurance payout allowed them to purchase a new home. It was Belle's first taste of how profitable tragedy could be. The Sorensen household seemed ordinary enough to neighbors. Belle and Mads had 4 children, Caroline, Axel, Myrtle, and Lucy. But beneath this facade of domestic normalcy, a darker pattern was emerging. In 1896, their adopted daughter, Caroline, died suddenly. The doctor cited acute colitis, but whispers began when Belle collected a sizable insurance payout. Then came the death of Axel in 1898, officially from hydrocephalus. Again, Belle collected insurance money. The most significant death came on July 30, 1900, the one day when 2 of Mads Sorensen's life insurance policies overlapped. The timing was extraordinarily convenient, almost impossibly so. He died suddenly, reportedly of heart failure. The doctor initially suspected strychnine poisoning, noting his characteristic arched back and grimace of death, but ultimately the official cause was ruled as natural. Belle's tears seemed genuine, her grief convincing. She collected $8,500, a fortune at the time. With this windfall, Belle purchased a farm in Laporte, Indiana. The property on McClung Road would become her killing ground, a place where she perfected her deadly craft. The Laporte farm appeared idyllic, 48 acres of fertile Indiana soil, a substantial brick house, several outbuildings, and a barn. Belle threw herself into farm life with characteristic energy. She raised hogs, tended crops, and became known in town as a hard-working widow. But Belle had bigger plans than farming. She began placing advertisements in Norwegian-language newspapers across the Midwest. The Scandinavian, the Dekara-Posten, and the Minneapolis Tidende. Personal comely widow who owns a large farm in one of the finest districts in LaPorte County, Indiana, desires to make the acquaintance of a gentleman equally well provided, with view of joining fortunes. No replies by letter considered unless sender is willing to follow answer with personal visit. Triflers need not apply. The ads were carefully crafted psychological traps. She appealed to both romantic longing and financial prudence, promising not just love, but a prosperous partnership. The phrase equally well provided attracted men with means, while triflers need not apply suggested a serious, respectable widow, not someone to be suspicious of. The first to answer was John Moe, who arrived from Minnesota in December 1906. He was last seen alive entering Belle's farmhouse. His disappearance barely caused a ripple. After all, men sometimes changed their minds about marriage. Then came George Anderson of Missouri, who would later provide crucial testimony about Belle's methods. Unlike her other victims, Anderson survived to tell his tale. He described arriving at the farm full of hope, how Belle had served him coffee that tasted bitter and metallic. Within minutes, his vision blurred and his limbs grew heavy. Fighting the overwhelming drowsiness, he managed to stagger to his room. He awoke hours later in the dead of night, his head pounding, to find Belle standing over his bed, holding a candle that cast grotesque shadows on her face. In that flickering light, he saw something in her eyes that chilled him to his core, a cold, calculating look like a butcher appraising livestock. She was studying him, waiting. Something primal in him screamed danger. At dawn, still groggy, he gathered his belongings and fled, not stopping until he was miles away from the farm. Belle's modus operandi was chillingly efficient. When a suitor arrived, she would wine and dine him, playing the role of the eager bride-to-be. She would express urgent financial needs, mortgage payments, farm equipment, sick relatives, and convince her victim to withdraw his savings or sign over his assets. Once the paperwork was complete, Belle would serve a final meal, often drugged with strychnine or chloral hydrate. As her victim succumbed to the poison, she would finish the job with more direct methods. Some were bludgeoned with a meat cleaver, others had their throats cut. The bodies were then dismembered in her basement, which she had equipped as a veritable butcher shop, complete with a dissection table, large barrels for disposal, meat hooks on the walls, and an array of saws and knives that would have been at home in any slaughterhouse. Belle's disposal methods were grimly efficient. She would feed parts of the bodies to her hogs, while burying other remains around the property. Some remains were burned in her large kitchen stove, the ashes scattered across her fields. The hogs destroyed evidence efficiently, and any bones that remained could be explained away as animal remains. She knew exactly which parts the pigs would consume completely, and which needed other disposal methods. Her children were aware something was wrong. Neighbors reported seeing them unusually quiet and fearful. Belle's daughter, Myrtle, was once overheard saying, "Mama killed my papa. She hit him with a meat cleaver and he died. Don't tell a soul." The list of Belle's victims grew steadily. Ole Budsberg, an elderly widower from Wisconsin who had sold his farm, disappeared in April 1907 after withdrawing his life savings. Andrew Helgelien, a wheat farmer from South Dakota, vanished in January 1908 after bringing $2,900 to Belle's farm, the proceeds from his successful harvest. Olaf Lindboe, a carpenter from Chicago, disappeared with his tools and savings. Henry Gerholt, a merchant from Wisconsin, went missing after liquidating his business. Olaf Sverenhud, who had just inherited money from his family in Norway, was never seen again after visiting Belle. The victims shared common traits. They were hard-working immigrants who had achieved modest success, most with no close family in America to report them missing. Identification was nearly impossible in many cases. Belle's dismemberment was thorough, and without dental records or photographs, luxuries most immigrants didn't have, many bodies remained nameless. Some historians estimate Belle killed at least 14 people, though others suggest the number could be as high as 40. The exact count remains unknown, as many victims were never reported missing. Solitary men with no close family, immigrants who had lost touch with relatives in the old country. Belle's methods evolved over time. She began demanding that suitors bring cash rather than bank drafts. She varied her advertisements to attract different types of victims. She even took in hired hands who mysteriously disappeared after receiving their wages. By early 1908, Belle's crimes were catching up with her. Andrew Helgelien's brother, Asla, had grown suspicious when Andrew's letters suddenly stopped. He wrote to Belle, demanding answers. Her replies were evasive, then threatening. In April 1908, Belle visited a lawyer, claiming that her former handyman, Ray Lampier, was harassing her. She made out a will, expressing fear for her life. Then, in the early hours of April 28, 1908, Belle's farmhouse erupted in flames. When the fire was extinguished, investigators found 4 bodies in the basement, 3 children and a headless woman. The body was assumed to be Belle, though it was significantly smaller than her known height and weight. Even more suspicious, the corpse lacked certain internal organs that should have been present, suggesting it had been dead longer than the fire would account for. More horrifyingly, as investigators searched the property, they began unearthing human remains from the yard and hog pen. The discoveries were gruesome: dismembered bodies, some in burlap sacks, others in shallow graves. The remains of at least 11 people were identified. though many more bone fragments suggested additional victims. A child's doll lay next to one grave, a haunting reminder that Belle's own children had played above this makeshift cemetery. The nation was shocked by the scope of Belle's crimes. Belle's daughter Myrtle's earlier words now took on a chilling significance. "Mama killed my papa. She hit him with a meat cleaver and he died. Don't tell a soul." The children had lived in this house of horrors, witnesses to their mother's crimes. Ray Lampier, Belle's former handyman and sometime lover, was arrested and tried for arson and murder. Lampier was known in town as a drifter with a drinking problem, someone Belle had hired and fired multiple times. Their relationship was volatile. Neighbors reported violent arguments and Lampier's threats against Belle. During his trial, he claimed Belle had faked her death. He said the headless body was actually a woman Belle had lured to the farm days before the fire, possibly a housekeeper she'd hired through an agency in Chicago. According to Lampier, Belle killed her, dressed her in Belle's clothes, removed identifying features, and placed her with the children's bodies. Lampier insisted he had helped Belle escape, driving her to the railway station in nearby Stillwell, where she caught a train to Chicago. He was convicted of arson but acquitted of murder, dying in prison in 1909. On his deathbed, he reportedly confessed to helping Belle kill 42 people and insisted she was still alive. Sightings of Belle were reported for decades after the fire. She was supposedly seen in Chicago, New York, and as far away as Mississippi. Some claimed she had fled to California, others to her native Norway. The mystery of her fate has never been solved. The Laporte farm became a macabre tourist attraction. Curiosity seekers paid 25 cents to tour the murder farm, walking through Belle's house of horrors, peering into the basement where she'd butchered her victims. Vendors sold lemonade and sandwiches to the crowds. Postcards featuring the burned farmhouse, the excavation sites, and even gruesome images of recovered remains sold briskly. One popular postcard showed Belle's basement with the caption, "The Den of the Female Bluebeard." The local sheriff kept a display of victims' skulls and bones in his office until public outcry forced their burial. Belle Gunness remains one of America's most notorious serial killers. Her crimes shattered the myth of rural innocence and exposed the dark underbelly of the American dream. She exploited the hopes and loneliness of immigrant men, turning their search for love and belonging into a death sentence. The impact on Laporte and the wider Midwest was profound. Trust evaporated overnight. Women who placed matrimonial ads faced suspicion. Farmers began locking their doors, something unheard of in rural communities. The case sparked a wave of fear about female criminality that swept the nation. Her story raises disturbing questions about gender and violence. In an era when women were seen as nurturing and passive, Belle used these stereotypes as camouflage for her predatory nature. She understood that few would suspect a widow and mother of being a calculating killer. Her case forced America to confront an uncomfortable truth, that evil knows no gender. She joined the ranks of notorious female killers like Lizzie Borden, but her body count far exceeded theirs. The exact number of Belle's victims will never be known. Some estimate she killed more than 40 people over 2 decades. Her crimes reveal how easily people could disappear in early 20th century America, especially immigrants with few connections. Perhaps most chillingly is the possibility that Belle escaped justice. If Ray Lampier told the truth, America's most prolific female serial killer lived out her days in freedom, her true identity hidden, her crimes unpunished. Thanks for watching this episode of Fireside Villainies, Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of the Midwest. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes from Fireside Villainies. You can also help me bring more episodes to life by becoming a member. Members get access to exclusive content, early releases and more. There's more info in the video description. And that brings us to the end of Belle Gunness's dark tale. You know, what's truly chilling about Belle is how she exploited the very things that make us human. Our need for love, companionship, and belonging. She turned the American dream into a nightmare for so many innocent people. The sheer calculation of it all is staggering. This wasn't someone who killed in fits of rage or passion. Belle planned every murder like a business transaction. And the fact that she may have gotten away with it, that's the stuff of nightmares. But here's what strikes me most. Belle's story is a reminder that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. It can wear a friendly smile, offer a home-cooked meal, and promise love and security. That's what makes it so dangerous. Her victims weren't foolish or naive. They were just people looking for connection in a new country, far from home. Belle understood that vulnerability and exploited it. Thanks for sticking with me through this disturbing chapter of history. I know these stories aren't easy to hear, but they're important to remember. And if you need a breather from these dark tales, check out my other YouTube channel, Hoodie History. That's where I tell all kinds of fascinating stories from the past. The link's in the description. Remember, history isn't just dusty old books and dates. It's real people and real stories. The good, the bad, and everything in between. And by understanding even the darkest parts of our past, we can work toward a better future. Keep watching Fireside Villainies for more stories from the dark recesses of history. Until next time, tread carefully in the shadows.